Today I'm going to do the paper 2 question analysis with you. But before I start analyzing the question, I would like to make some general notes on how you guys have performed. First of all, handwriting is very important. I don't need you to write very neatly or just beautifully or what, but if your handwriting is not clear, if the markers cannot see you writing clearly, I would just assume, or the markers would just assume that you misspelled that words. Alright? So it will impact your mark for language. Okay? So please write more neatly and also have a better time management, because for most of the students, I could tell they just ran out of time, so that they had to write very fast, so that their handwriting become very hard to read. So that's another problem, time management. And last but not least, I would say the most serious problem that you guys have would be formality. Formality, it determines the language use. And so I'm going to spend some time on the language formality. So as you all know, that would be formal versus informal. So for formal writing, formal language, there are some things that you shouldn't do. Okay, first of all, that's contractions. No contractions for formal writing. Alright? Contractions means I am, and then you contract it to I'm. Okay? That's kind of like short forms. You are, you contract it to your. Alright? So please don't use contractions, because I see a handful of students, they use contractions for the question about the letter of complaint, which is quite inappropriate. So no contractions, but for formal, yes, please use contractions. You should use contractions. Alright, so the second thing is informal words. Well, by the look of it, of course, you know that you shouldn't use informal words in formal writing. By informal words, I mean colloquial English or slangs, such as bump into somebody. So, bump into somebody, it doesn't mean that you really physically bump into a person, but actually you met someone randomly in the streets. So you would say, oh, I saw my friend Paul yesterday. So you would say, oh, I bumped into Paul yesterday. So this is colloquial and slang use. So in formal writing, no. But in informal, yes. Oh, another informal words or slangs that I quite like is a piece of cake. Alright? I don't know if you like Jolene's High or what, or not. In one of her songs, Cigarettes, she keeps singing these slangs. A piece of cake is just a piece of cake. Actually, it doesn't mean the cake itself. The meaning of this whole phrase is, it means that it's very easy to be accomplished. A task which is very easy to be accomplished. Okay, for example, in the exam, you find it is just so easy, so you can just say, oh, the exam is just a piece of cake. Alright, so you can use these slangs in informal writing. but you can't use this slang in the formal writing. Alright? So very clear. And the third thing would be short forms. Now, short forms that is different than contractions. They're not the same. Well, short forms here, I mean like VIP, like short forms of date, like 17th of March. So for VIP or PE, these are very commonly known short forms, right? So you may use it in informal writing, but you can't use it in formal writing. Yeah? So some of you may wonder, what does VIP and PE stand for? So I'm gonna tell you now. So VIP means very important person or people. PE is physical education. It does surprise me that when I teach this in my class, in my English class, that almost half of my students don't know what they stand for. So I think you guys should know, just in case. Alright, now, so you have these three things, okay, to avoid informal writing. But now you may wonder, so how do I know whether I need to write informal language or informal language? Okay, so there are two criterion. First of all, you need to know the reader of your writing. If the reader is someone who is more superior than you, for example, you're writing to the principal, you're writing to a manager, you're writing to a client. Well, this happens mostly in your listening part B, but it is also relevant. If you're writing to a client, if you're writing to your teacher, someone who is more superior, then please use formal language. But if you're writing to your friends, like your peers, okay, okay, then please use informal language if it's about something personal. Yeah? And then the second thing that you may consider is the types of the writing. Okay, so I have gathered all the types of writing that has appeared in your DSE exam. So I've categorized them into three types, that is formal, semi-formal, and informal. So let me talk about the formal types first. First of all, of course, a formal email or letter to the principal, or formal email to a company you request for sponsor. So please use formal language. The second one, letter to the editor. The third one, an application letter for maybe applying for a job, or maybe applying for volunteering project. And then letter of complaint, or a report, or a letter of invitation. Okay, now these are the most common types that you will see in paper 2 or your paper 3 part B. Alright? And then for semi-formal, speech, debate speech, The first one, speech. For example, opening speech, which would appear in your part A of your paper 2. School article. Feature article. And web page. For example, information web page. And then the last one would be informal. When you see that you're asked to write a personal letter to your cousin, to your friend, giving advice to your friend, to your cousin. Okay, then it would be informal. And the next one is story, which I do not recommend because it is I would say it's very hard for you to get high marks in story in terms of content, first of all, because for story you have to have some specific shocking elements in your story, and most of the time students either they write very plain, boring stories, or they just can't wrap it up at the end. They would just say, oh, it's just a dream. So they just can't explain or justify what happened, and it would give the markers will give you very, very low mark for well, not very, but relatively low mark for your content. And for language-wise, story we require first of all a very large range of vocabulary, and second of all you need to have dialogues, which students are very weak in. So stories, unless you're very confident about it, I would not recommend you to write story. Alright, so this is that's all for the general notes and some tips. And so moving on, I'll start talking about part A. So in part A, you are asked to write a brief description to promote a new app called Food Lion, and you are working for a marketing company. Okay, so you're actually helping your client, a new startup. A startup means a new small-sized company. Alright, so I'm quite surprised that a third of you went a little bit off topic, because first of all you wrote about my app, my company. We are working on Food Lion. We are working on this app and we have just launched it. Hey, hold on, this is not your app, okay? You are asked, okay, you are working in a marketing company and Food Lion has asked you to help you write a description to help them promote it. So if you write we or I or something like that, or my company, then it is definitely irrelevant. Alright, so please read the questions carefully, okay? This is not your app. You are asked to promote it. Alright? So this is one of the biggest problem. And then was I think 5 to 10 of you so far. I really like the history of the app. And one of you were talking about, it's just actually like sharing a story, the history of the app, okay? First of all, you have to include the year. When did it start? Who started it? And maybe why the founder found this app. or design this app. One of the students was really funny. He or she wrote that because the founder's daughter was once very hungry and she was very grumpy like a lion. So, but there was no such app at that time. So the founder have decided to create this app and then call it Food Lion, because her daughter would just get mad and grumpy when she's hungry. And I liked it, and it's something creative and it's something funny. So yes. Alright, so for the history, yes, you need to include the year, the person, and maybe the reason why the founder designed it. Okay, so that it would give more content to your writing, yeah? And then for the features, the prices and reason, most of you write something similar. But I would like to point out one thing, is that around half of you don't know how to call the person who delivered the food for you. Actually, in most of the apps, like Uber Eats, like Deliveroo, like Foodpanda, they would use the term riders. Okay, so some of you wrote deliver man or deliver guy. That is not very appropriate. All right, so I would say riders or the delivery man if you insist. Okay, but I would say riders are more appropriate. Yeah, and some of you, I would like to mention that is quite good, is that they mention the pandemic. Okay, the reason for using this app is because of the pandemic. So people would not like to go out to dine out or to go out to have meals. So that it is a very safe. It is safe for you to use this app to just order the food and have it delivered to your home. So I would say this is one of the better reasons. Yeah. So in general, I think most of you have done a pretty good job in part A, because there's not a rigid format for description. So I would say your paragraphs are well developed, and the language is easy to handle, because it is a description for you to promote something, and it's for the public to read it, and so it's kind of like a leisure reading. So for the language, you just need to be like semi-formal. Alright, and so it's very easy for you to handle. There's no very rigid rules, and it's okay for you to use contractions. So I think in general you have done quite well. Yes. So moving on to part B, the first question, question 2. This question asks you to write a letter of complaint to express your dissatisfaction with your staying experience in a 5-star hotel. Now, because the text type is a letter, and you're writing to a manager, so the language should be formal. But some of the candidates used contractions like I've stayed. For example, I have stayed. Something like that. First of all, the tense is incorrect, because you should use past tense. Okay, so you should just write I stayed. So most of the description you should use past tense instead of present perfect tense. So please, before the exam, have a proper revision on the usage of tenses. Okay, don't mix them up. All right, because these are all past incidents. So you should use past tense. And another thing about the language is that some of you use too emotional adjectives. Like you were talking to your friend, you were complaining to your friend, but actually you're writing to a manager. Okay, so you should sound a little bit more sincere and formal instead of being exaggerating. Okay, because if you use too emotional adjectives or emotional expressions, like how dare you, something like that, then imagine if you're the manager who is reading this letter, would he take you seriously? He would like have question whether what you're saying is true or not. So please don't use too emotional expressions or adjectives. Just solely described how bad, or you may use the word appalling, the surface or the food was. Okay, you don't need to be too emotional. Yeah, and some of the candidates mention the price. Okay, now some of you said that you paid for like $10,000 for a night. Now I'm not sure if you are familiar with the pricing of the 5-star hotel room, but if you're paying $10,000, then you will be staying perhaps in a suite. Okay, a suite, not just a normal bedroom. Alright, so please be reasonable. Okay, and another thing that is a little bit over the top is that you complain that the price of the hotel was too high, and actually you paid when you booked the hotel, before you checked in the hotel. Yeah, so it is a little bit unreasonable that you are complaining about the price being too high. Instead, actually, you can complain that you were charged extra. Okay, this would be a bit more reasonable, because when you booked a hotel, before you booked a hotel, all the price, like the room or the extra service you asked for, like the food, is already listed out very clearly before you booked online. So if you are now complaining about the price being too high, then it just doesn't make sense. Yeah, so instead of complaining about the price being too high, perhaps you can complain that you were charged extra money for nothing. Okay, or the price that you paid, that you were asked to pay online, was actually different, okay, from the price that you saw at the hotel, or you were asked to pay more at the hotel when you checked in. Okay, so this would be more reasonable. Okay, and another thing that I would like to talk about is the complimentary clause for a formal letter. A third of you still don't know whether you should write yours sincerely or yours faithfully. Alright, so I'm here to remind you, okay, this is a very, very big mistake, because you should have been taught about the usage of sincerely and faithfully, the difference of them in Form 2 or Form 1. Okay, so this is a mistake that is not acceptable. Yeah, so for your sincerely, you only use it when you know who your reader is, when you know his surname or his name. Alright, but since you're writing to the manager of the hotel, you don't know who that is. Okay, you just know the post of that person, so you don't know the name of that person, you don't know the name of the manager. So please write yours faithfully. There's no other choice. Okay, there's no other choice. Okay, so this is a question that is, I would say, quite entertaining to read, because some of your description is quite funny and quite vivid. Okay, you use some powerful adjectives to describe the rooms, how dirty the room was, how bad the food was, which is good. Okay, so now let's move on to question 3. For question 3, learning English through poems and songs, in this question you are asked to write an article. Okay, now the thing about article is that you must include a title. Alright, you must include an eye-catching title, okay, or a title that summarizes what this writing is about, what this article is about. Okay, so now let's take a look at the question. So your music teachers asked you to listen to the song You've Got a Friend in Me, and what this song about, this is very important. It highlights the importance of friendship. Alright, so this is the first main point. And a second point about this song is that how friends help each other to cope with their problems. Okay, so actually it's a little bit complicated, this question, because it looks like that you just need to share the situation where you help the friend deal with a difficult situation. But before you do this, you actually need to write about the song. Okay? For example, you can write about why you like the song. Okay? Is it the melody? Is it catchy? The lyrics are meaningful? Or the singer singing voice is very attractive, or his singing technique is very good, okay, or his voice is very comfortable to listen to, something like that. Okay, so the first part you have to write about the songs, okay, and I would say the message, the lyrics, the message, okay, what is the message about? Okay, so after talking about why you like the song and what the message is, then you can move on to talk about what happened. Why do you like the song? Oh, because you have a similar situation and you feel the song. Okay, so here you, that is I, because I'm talking about to you, the candidates. So you feel the song, and then you can start by sharing the situation. And here, actually, sharing the situation where you help the friend deal with a difficult one is that it's like a storytelling. Okay, so in this sharing or in this storytelling, you need to give the background of the story first. Who your friend was or is. How long have you been friends together? So this is the background of the story. And then you can start by telling what happened. So what the difficult situation is. And then how you helped him or her to get out of that situation. Okay? So this is part. Alright then, after sharing the story, then in the last part, in the conclusion, then please tie your story back to the song. Okay? What do they have in common? What do your story and the message of the song have in common. Alright? Because some of the students, they just forgot or they just don't know that they need to write about the song. Alright? So that the organization is quite weak. Okay? The organization is weak because if you didn't talk about the song, then your conclusion, your summary, then it cannot be tied back to the song. So they just focus on what happened to their friends and what was the difficult situation. Okay, so please, I would say, please use a highlighter when you read the question. Highlight what are the important points that you need to cover in the question. Yeah? And for these questions, the language used should be semi-formal. Okay? You don't need to be too formal because you're writing an article. And this article, well, because the question did not state clearly where this article was published, so it may be published in a school newsletter. So if it is published in a school newsletter, then you don't need to be too formal. Alright? So in question 4, learning English through social issues, here your identity is stated very clearly. So you're a school newspaper reporter and you're going to write an article for the school newspaper on the topic studygrams. Okay? So here in the questions, what studygram is already been described very clearly, I would say. And the text type of this question is an article, and the language used should be semi-formal. Okay, so that means you can use some colloquial English and some slangs and expressions. They are okay, and maybe some contractions as well. You don't need to be too formal. And most of the candidates have done quite well in this aspect, in this language aspect, because it's quite easy to handle. But for the content, there are some problems. First of all, there are 3 parts that you need to write in your article. First of all, you need to talk about the reasons why students use studygrams. Okay? Well, most of the students do spend some time on this. And the second part is the positive impacts on using studygrams. And the third part is the negative impacts. Now, most of the students, they are able to write all 3 parts. But some, I would say maybe a third or a quarter, they just write, they don't have a very balanced writing among these 3 parts. Okay, some of them, they just spend a lot of the time talking about the positive impacts, but they just briefly describe the negative impacts. Okay, so this would make the candidates have a very low mark in their organization. Okay, and here the question has already asked you to give some examples. Some of the examples given by the candidates are quite nice and quite impressive. Is that they use friends. They use their friends' experience. What I mean here, for example, is that they mentioned that one of their friends, for example, called Chris, he was addicted to studygrams, which made him do very poorly in his exams, for example. So yeah, if they use the friend's experience, then the examples will be more lively. Okay, so that is one of the good things some of the candidates are able to do. Alright, so let's move on to the next question. So moving on to question 5, learning English through popular culture. Now, in this question, you are asked to write a letter to the editor. So text type is letter to the editor. And you have to talk about watching television. So the language here, please use formal language. Okay, so dear editor, okay, formal language. So no contractions, no slangs, no colloquial English, okay? And the complimentary clause, please write yours faithfully. Okay, please do not write best wishes or yours sincerely. This is a very fatal mistake, I would say. Okay, so this is the closing, the complimentary close. Alright, okay, so let's take a look at what you need to write. Now, some may think that watching television is harmful to teenagers' development, while others believe that it brings several benefits to teenagers. Now here, you need to give details. So first of all, details of the trend of watching television. Secondly, explain the benefits of watching television for teenagers. Okay, well, this is one of the most popular questions that the candidates chose. But I'm quite surprised that about 95% of the candidates, when they're writing about the trend of watching television, they said that watching television is very popular among teenagers. Is that the case? Is that the case? Still popular among teenagers? Come on, you are a teenager, right? You guys are teenagers. You should know whether you watch television or not. Actually, the trend of watching television is actually, it's not very popular anymore. It's on the decline. The popularity of watching television, the popularity of watching television among teenagers is on the decline, right? So you need to talk about why teenagers don't watch as much television. Okay? And also, what are the substitutes? Okay, 替代品，有啲咩替代品啊? For example, the TV apps, right? Because teenagers are using the mobile phones. All the time. So you may say that teenagers are using their mobile phones all the time. Now the television companies or the broadcasting companies, they now turn to developing TV apps. Alright, so that more teenagers will watch television now after the apps being developed. Yeah, so that is one of the problems for the trend. Okay, and then the second part is to explain the benefits of watching television. Well, in this part, I think most of you have done very well. You said that students can broaden their horizons. They can learn some skills, for example, cooking, learn more information about different parts of the world through watching different kinds of programs, like the traveling programs. So I think you do quite well in this part. And then, yeah, I think the only problem is that when you're talking about the trend, I think is you are not living in this era. you're like talking about the trend in the 1980s. In the 1980s, yeah, many teenagers watch television because they don't have their mobile phones. Yeah, but nowadays, no, we don't watch as much television as before. Okay, so let's move on. 7. Learning English through drama. Now, you are the chairperson of the drama club. Several students have told you they would like to join the club, but they're too shy to speak in front of a crowd. So, here in this question, you are going to write a blog, a personal blog. So, for a personal blog, okay, this text type, there are two things that you must include. Apart from the title that the question has already asked you to give it, the second thing that you must include in the blog is the date. The date, okay, the dates that you publish the blog. And the third thing is not compulsory, but you may also include the author, that is you, Chris Wong, okay? So these three things are the features that should be included for in the personal blog, okay? Now, because this is a personal blog, so the language used should be informal, okay? So you can use colloquial English, slangs, and some spoken English, okay, in your personal blog. And for the content, actually you have quite a few things to say in the content. First of all, you need to talk about the benefits of joining the drama club. And second of all, address their worry, the students' worry. And then give advice on what students can do before they join the club, okay? So I would say this writing is quite difficult if you're not very familiar with drama, but I can give you some points. For example, for benefits of joining the drama club, first of all, you can sharpen your language skills, okay? Because you need to speak the lines, okay? And also you'll be braver, okay, for public speaking, or even you may be more confident in your oral exam because of the experience that you're used to speaking in front of a big crowd, okay? So the second thing is that you need to address their worry. That means that you need to show understanding that they feel shy or uncomfortable, okay, to speak in front of a crowd. Okay, that means you need to show some empathy, okay? Something like, oh, I really understand some of our students are not very comfortable speak in front of a crowd because da 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 da. So this is actually a transition paragraph for you to move on to the next part. Okay, so this is a transitional paragraph to move to the next part of your writing. That is to give advice how they can prepare themselves before joining the drama club. Okay. For example, they can practice in front of their close friends first, so that they get used to speaking in front of somebody. Okay, making a speech in front of somebody. Okay, or they can watch some drama. Okay, and learn or imitate the actors. Okay, Peter is your close friend who was invited to be the captain of the football team at school. However, his parents strongly opposed this invitation as they think that this would adversely affect, okay, there is a typo, a word is missing, firstly affect his academic results. So you have to write a personal letter. So the text type is personal letter. Of course, the language used should be informal, yeah? So let's see what you have to write. So you have to write a letter to Peter to support him to accept this offer, alright? So you already have a stance. Alright? In this letter, provide him with reason. So you need to give him some reason why he should accept the offer. And then second of all, address his worry and provide some recommendations. Okay, so in this writing, 3 things you need to talk about. First of all, you need to, actually 4 things. First of all, you have to write your stance. Your stance, that is, encourage him to accept the offer. Okay, and then second of all, you have to give reasons why you need to you're asking him to accept this offer. So maybe some of these candidates have done quite well in this part. They so the reasons that why you encourage him to accept this offer. For example, he can train his sense of responsibility. He can train his leadership skills. Just like that. And most of the students are able to cover that or mention that, so that's good. And then you have to address his worry. So what is his worry? You have to state it first, okay? His worry is that his parents oppose to this idea because they think this would affect his academic results. And now, some of the candidates are quite smart. They give Peter an identity that he is in Form 5. Okay, so because he is in Form 5, he's preparing for his DSE exam. Yeah, so it's reasonable for his parents to be worried. But he still have 2 years before the exam. Okay, so he can still have some time. Okay, so he can still join the extracurricular activity. But some of the students wrote that Peter is now in Form 6. So actually it's a little bit difficult for you to persuade Peter or even his parents for him or for them to accept the idea to let Peter be the captain of the football team. So please don't set a trap for yourself, okay? Don't write about Peter being an S6 student, okay? Because in that case, it's very hard for you to justify your stance that Peter should take the offer of being the captain captain of the football team. Yeah? So after addressing his worry, you need to provide recommendation. So here the recommendation actually is for you to give some advice to Peter on how to persuade his parents. Okay? So actually this letter is kind of like a persuasive letter. First of all, you need to persuade. Persuasive. First of all, you need to persuade Peter to take the offer. And then you need to give advice to Peter to persuade his parents to let him be the football team captain. Alright, so you need to pay attention to your language. That means for persuasive tone, you need to use some emotive vocabulary and expressions. Okay, so this is it for question 8. So moving on to question 9, short stories. Now your creative writing teacher has given your class the following task. Okay, to write a short story. A pandemic killed a quarter of the world's population 2 years ago. Okay, so you have to pay attention to the timeline. It happened already 2 years ago. Okay, so write a short story describing the changes in Hong Kong since the pandemic and how you feel about them. So for short story, although it kind of like you're just here to describe the changes in Hong Kong, but you need to have a storyline. Okay, you need to have the elements of a short story. So far, I think less than 5 students chose this question, and most of them, they just plainly describe the changes in Hong Kong and the feeling. And actually, that was not that I don't see that as a story. I would just say that it's just an article. Okay, so for a story, you must have these elements. First of all, you need to talk about the background of your story. So the background has been given to you. A pandemic killed a quarter of the world, but you need to give some additional information. What kind of pandemic is that? And how it killed people. Yeah? And then you need to talk about the characters in your story. Yeah? So, of course, you are the main character. And what about the people around you? Okay, for example, you have your friends, your parents, and then the rising action. So, what happened? Okay, what happened to your friends and parents? And what happened to Hong Kong? Okay, now, this is the main part, the rising action. What happened? Okay, you have to talk about the change 2 years ago and now. What has changed? Okay, what has changed? Okay, so the climax, okay, the climax, okay, is that what does the change, or what did the change impact you or your friends or Hong Kong as a whole? How did the change impact you, Hong Kong, or your friends, or the world as a whole? And then the ending, you may use the ending to talk about your feeling. Okay, now this is one of the many ways that you can tackle this question. You may use other ways to tackle it, but you cannot just describe the changes. You have to have some elements of story, okay? The characters, the background, the climax, and the ending. Okay, so after talking about the feeling, your feeling about the change, and what about the future? Okay, for example, it's just one of the examples that you may use. Okay, so but again, I would not recommend you to write stories, and then unless you are very confident about your English. Okay, because for the language, although it's informal, but you need to use very powerful adjectives, because you have to describe the story, you have to describe the characters, and then you also have to use dialogues and different types of sentence structures to make your story a very attractive one. Yeah? Okay, so this is it. So good luck in your exam, and goodbye.